Euromoney's Vietnam Global Investment Forum held in Hanoi. Vietnam to develop semiconductor industry. Hello, it's good to see you again on another episode of Bizline brought to you by VTV International. My name is Ling He. As usual, we start our show with several highlights in the economic scene from the past week. As part of an official visit to Cuba, State President Trương Binh Sang attended a Vietnamese-Cuban business forum on Wednesday. Speaking at the forum, President Trương Binh Sang said that with the existing advantages and proper policies, Cuban economy will recover and grow stronger in the years to come and become a potential market for Vietnamese foreign investors. However, the current bilateral trade between the two sides still remains modest. In 2014, this figure was $200 million, with exports from Vietnamese enterprises prevailing those from Cuba. The Vietnamese leader also asked for more efforts to strengthen research and information exchange to promote economic cooperation between the two countries in the time to come. During the business forum, Cuba and Vietnam officials signed 6 agreements for economic and trade, including highlights of a joint venture for the construction of a 5-star hotel in Cuba. The Vietnam Global Investment Forum opened in Hanoi on September 30th. Prime Minister Nguyen Thanh Dũng and more than 600 representatives from investment groups and experts across the world attended the event. The event, co-organized by Euromoney and the Ministry of Planning and Investment, discussed Vietnam's economic recovery and outlook for 2016, free trade agreements and various economic matters. The forum took place in the context of Vietnam quickly becoming one of the fastest-growing economies in Asia, and the government expanding great effort to speed up the global integration process. According to participants, FDI is being heavily poured into Vietnam to take advantage of new generation free trade agreements or FTA, such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the EU-Vietnam FTA. Vietnam rose 12 spots in the World Economic Forum's Global Competitiveness Report for the 2015-2016 period, which was announced on Tuesday. Vietnam now ranks 56th out of 140 countries with 4.3 points. Vietnam's ranking has been on the rise for the past 3 years. The country was ranked 75th out of 144 in 2012, 78th out of 148 in 2013, and 68th out of 144 in 2014. In Asia, Vietnam's Global Competitiveness Index is ranked 5th after Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines. The Vietnamese Brand Week kicked off last Sunday with a trade fair in Hanoi. Launched by the Ministry of Industry and Trade, the event has drawn over 200 companies and is aimed at further promoting the Buy Vietnamese Goods campaign. The campaign has set an impressive target for a 90% recognition rate among Vietnamese consumers and enterprises in 2015, while the distribution of Vietnamese goods to remote areas will be increased to 70%. As of 2020, the campaign intends for all provinces and cities throughout Vietnam to be equipped with services that connect the supply chain of Vietnamese goods. The event will last until October 4th in Hanoi, Da Nang, and Ho Chi Minh City. Gross domestic product, or GDP, in third quarter of this year reached a growth rate of 6.81%, according to the latest reports of the General Statistics Office earlier on Tuesday morning. For the first 9 months of this year, economic growth recorded the highest level in the past 5 years at 6.5%. In particular, agriculture, forestry, and fishing industry rises by 2.08%, manufacturing and construction 9.57%, while services rises by 6.17%. According to the General Statistics Office, the result is attributable to the improvements of manufacturing and retail sector. To date, Vietnam has reduced 420 hours of tax payments from its previous total of 537 hours, exceeding Government Resolution 19 requirements for reducing the number of tax payment hours to 121 in 2015. The Ministry of Finance has also issued Circular 96, removing many procedures for the declaration of enterprise income tax, reducing another 30 hours for taxpayers. In addition, the General Department of Taxation said that with 98% of business tax declarations being processed online, 10 more hours will be cut for taxpayers. The General Department of Taxation has cooperated with 27 commercial banks to facilitate these electronic tax payments. So far, nearly 302,000 registered enterprises have participated, reaching 68.7% of the target. We have just reviewed several economic and business highlights from the past week. Up next, we'll learn more about how Vietnam has been eyeing semiconductor industry in our crosstalk. After two consecutive successful conferences held in Ho Chi Minh City, for the first time a conference on strengthening partnerships to grow Vietnam's semiconductor industry took place in Hanoi from September 20th to the 23rd. Organized by SEMI, a global industry association to support the development of the semiconductor industry, the conference attracted participants from Vietnam's local high-tech parks, government agencies, global semiconductor businesses, and experts in the field. The conference triggered many questions about the direction to develop the semiconductor industry in Vietnam, specifically targeting its potential growth in the north of Vietnam. I had an opportunity to talk with representatives from SEMI, Saigon Industry Corporation, or the CNS, that is investing in building the first chip manufacturing facility in Vietnam, as well as a representative from a university in Holland to find out more about this topic. But before listening to our interview, let's take a look at the following clip.
Semiconductors are everywhere around us. TV, computers, iPod, camera, phone, traffic lights, and almost all electrical household appliances. Semiconductor technology helps reduce the size of electronic devices, make them flatter but more powerful. 10 years ago, cell phone used to be heavy and can handle only calling and messaging functions. Nowadays, thanks to semiconductor technology, a smartphone is like a mini computer that can handle many tasks. Globally, there are more than 400 companies producing chips. However, the global semiconductor industry is dominated by the US, South Korea, Japan, Singapore, and Taiwan. Vietnam used to be seen as a potential hub for semiconductor processing. Samsung Electronics recently built a $1.3 billion factory in Thái Nguyên province to produce electronic components and chips. Intel last year opened its first made in Vietnam Haswell CPU chip with its CPU production line at the Saigon High-Tech Park, a $1 billion investment project. It is forecasted that by the end of this year, 80% of the semiconductor chips used in computers around the world will be made in Vietnam.
Thank you very much for joining in our program today.
You're welcome.
Global companies like Foxconn and Intel have shown their interest in Vietnam's semiconductor industry by investing in the north and the south of Vietnam. Why Vietnam?
Well, they, as many global companies, continue to look for favorable manufacturing locations, and Vietnam certainly is one, with a combination of incentives and the existence of the high-tech parks in Ho Chi Minh City and up north here. I think this is a very good destination for that. Note, though, that Intel, for example, only, quote-unquote, has test assembly and packaging facilities here in Ho Chi Minh City. So no front-end wafer fab like the CNS one exists yet.
Well, I would say that other global companies like NXP, STM, Freescale would also be very interested to invest in Vietnam, given the proper technical staff, infrastructure, where they can grow. Vietnam itself is, of course, for these companies, quite an interesting market in electronic products. That is a reason in itself to expand and go there.
As a senior advisor of Saigon Industry Corporation, how well do you think Vietnam has been taking advantage of all of these investments?
So this is obvious when Intel and Foxconn come here and implant the manufacturing, and other companies outsource their manufacturing to Vietnam. That means that Vietnam is a a very good location for manufacturing. So why don't we invest in manufacturing of microchip? And that, I think, that is a big motivation for us to do so. And with this, we can contribute to those companies that are manufacturing electronics good in Vietnam. A lot of products which is very low at the current time period, and we need to improve this situation.
And in addition, the wafer fab attracts a lot of international stakeholders in the semiconductor industry to support the growing ecosystem for chip manufacturing here.
$10 billion is the number of chips consumed in the Vietnamese market per year. $2 billion is the money Vietnamese companies spend on imports of semiconductors per year. Up to now, electronic components for the semiconductor industry in Vietnam are mostly imported, and there isn't any existing semiconductor fabrication plant, or fab in short, built in Vietnam.
Để sản xuất cái sản phẩm lĩnh vực này thì cạnh tranh rất lớn. Cái đầu tư về phần cứng là cũng đòi hỏi rất là nhiều, và cái công nghệ luôn luôn thay đổi. Thì các cái doanh nghiệp của chúng ta chưa đủ lớn để phát triển, và cái tính cạnh tranh của lĩnh vực này rất là cao.
Semiconductor factories ironically require the highest overhead investment, but bring the lowest returns. The cost of building a plant could be up to hundreds of millions of US dollars, while the profit is lower than other higher added value stages, such as chip design or chip application. However, it is necessary for Vietnam to build its own manufacturing facilities if Vietnam wants to increase its control in products that involve security matter. By the end of May 2015, Vietnamese Prime Minister Nguyễn Tấn Dũng approved the project to build the country's first chip manufacturing plant in Saigon High-Tech Park. The plan cost about $300 million invested by Saigon Industry Corporation, or CNS. Once in operation, CNS can produce 1.8 billion chips a year, with revenue from 100 to 150 million US dollars.
Chúng tôi sẽ rất là quan tâm và sẽ tích cực tham gia vào các giải pháp như là giao thông thông minh, như là thành phố thông minh, Smart City, vân vân. Rồi là chúng tôi sẽ làm việc với các cái tổ chức ngân hàng, và đặc biệt những dự án của chính phủ như là chứng minh thư nhân dân, như hộ chiếu điện tử, vân vân. Tất cả cái đó là chúng tôi rất quan tâm, như là những cái yếu tố nguồn đầu vào thị trường để cho nhà máy có thể phát triển sản xuất ổn định.
Vietnamese Prime Minister has approved CNS a project to build a manufacturing facility to produce chips in the country. Can you update us on the progress of the project?
In terms of the progress, we have passed the so-called, the very important milestone in beginning of 2015. The Prime Minister agreed that CNS project is a part of the development plan for semiconductor industry in Vietnam. So we are entitled to be treated with preferential in terms of support. Okay, so that is a big milestone that we have passed. Of course, going forward, we need to do a lot of work, meaning that we have to optimize the project so that the risk is minimized. Okay, for a company like CNS, we are a state company, and I think the amount of investment is quite high for a company like us. So that I hope that the government and the ministries can help us, give us some help in hand, so that we can develop the wafer fab project more efficiently and more effectively.
Semiconductor industry has been around for 5 decades. And some renowned companies in the world, like Wacom in the United States, only focuses on research and design, while outsourcing is production. That's why some experts believe that Vietnam should only focus on designs and should not build any chip plants. What's your viewpoint on this?
Well, first of all, they outsource the production to countries like Vietnam. So it's kind of obvious that it is a rather big opportunities for countries like Vietnam to embark on this. I think it would be short-sighted to state that you only need design. I would think that the industry only goes forward if you put the full engine on board, which starts with IC fabrication, an essential engine of the industry, and around that the design industry will also grow and expand just for the fact that you have a local industry in manufacturing. So one doesn't go without the other if you want to have growth in that industry.
Yeah, I think the wafer fab is like, if I may take an example, like a car, okay? You can concentrate on designing of the car, okay, which Italian people are doing very well, okay? However, if the car is not running reliably and fast enough, and that needs the engine, and the engine is a wafer fab. And as we said before, Vietnam is a manufacturing site. It is a location where all the manufacturers are concentrating. So why not adding a small engine, it's called wafer fab, to make the semiconductor car running very well.
Would you like to add anything?
I think you can think of it as a wheel with a hub and spokes, right? The wafer fab is really at the center, but it attracts an entire ecosystem of sub-suppliers, of equipment makers, of material and component manufacturers. Many of them, I would think, over time will be local. You need chemicals and gases and a lot of other things to run the car, right? So while the fab is at the center, it has the additional effect of attracting a lot of other businesses.
Yeah.
From a global perspective, can you share what model other countries choose to develop their manufacturing plant that Vietnam can learn from?
I have worked in Singapore, I have worked in Germany, I have worked in America, and now Vietnam. The model of the other countries around us in Asia is they start with the back end, very simple, okay, and then move up the ladder and they start the front end, okay. Vietnam has already the back end, okay. Most of the captive, that means they are producing only for their foreign, their mother or father companies outside. Now it's time for Vietnam to consider the front end part, which is a wafer fab. We have design, we have a back end. It's just a link is not there yet, so we need to make the link. And if we have the link, we can develop the industry, and if we look at the total industry, it's worth more than $10 billions, and the wafer fab only needs 300 million. So I think this investment needs to be done.
I think that's probably one of the first things you do, that you look around the globe and see, you know, what markets are similar to yours. South America is emerging slowly, but it is emerging. And you should also look at, you know, historic studies, Korea, Taiwan, Japan, when they came up in the semiconductor industry and developed their own industry really for domestic purposes. But from a global association point of view, this is really where our events come in. Smaller trade missions like this one, but also our big semicon shows around the world, where people can come together. And I would invite people from Vietnam to really come, for example, to Semicon Southeast Asia in Penang, Malaysia next April, meet other stakeholders, talk, learn, share experiences. I think that's probably the most efficient way of gaining knowledge and gaining experience.
Located in Ho Chi Minh City-based Vietnam National University, the Integrated Circuit Design Research and Education Center, or ICDREC, is a leader in training, research and transferring technology in Vietnam's semiconductor industry.
Tôi rất là tự hào là các cái công ty nước ngoài hiện nay đã bắt đầu tiến tới liên kết với chúng tôi. Nhật hiện nay là chúng tôi có 2 hoặc 3 công ty đều hợp tác với chúng tôi. Các bạn biết Nhật họ rất là khó trong việc tìm đối tác đầu tư. Sau thời gian nghiên cứu vào cả 2-3 năm thì họ đánh giá chúng tôi là những cái đơn vị có khả năng để có thể cùng tham gia những dự án của họ.
Creating an ecosystem to solve the question of input and output for the semiconductor industry is considered a vital task for Vietnam. A specific step towards this goal is to enhance the role of high-tech parks in the country.
Cơ sở hạ tầng cho ngành này cũng rất là quan trọng. Ví dụ như chúng tôi có khu công nghệ cao là cái điều kiện rất tốt cho các cái doanh nghiệp đầu tư vào đây. Họ sẽ được đảm bảo các cái cơ sở vật chất cũng như được ưu đãi.
Ho Chi Minh City is a lead in semiconductor industry in Vietnam with many factories. However, Hanoi is regarded to have a great potential to develop the industry thanks to human resources in terms of both quality and quantity.
With so many universities and research centers in Hanoi, the city is seen to be a potential hub for semiconductor industry in Vietnam. As an expert in education in this particular field, what do you think about the potential of Hanoi in particular and Vietnam in general to live up to their potential in semiconductor industry?
So first of all, the remark is that you have a lot of talented, smart people. And they're well educated, but to become practical, they need extra steps. So essentially in the semiconductor industry, a very good base education is of course of prime importance, but it's not sufficient. And specific trainings are needed. That knowledge is there, partly at the universities, but also partly at other countries in the world. It's very nice that from our experience in Delft, where we have educated a lot of students for the semiconductor industry that go and work at companies like NXP in fabs, that we can share that knowledge and help, first of all, train the students, and when they become expert, train the trainers to help expand that audience. I may note that in this industry, there's also a lot of opportunities for girls to make a career. In semiconductor fabs, if you look around in the world, if you look in foundries, if you step into a semiconductor fab, you will find a lot of girls working in there. They're accurate, they can work constantly, and they're real competition for the boys.
Now let's move on to the solutions and strategies to develop the semiconductor industry in the country. Let's start with a Vietnamese labor force. What do you think are needed to be done?
Well, one of the biggest challenges besides the used equipment purchasing is the so-called training. I do believe that every companies want to establish a fab or manufacturing here need a lot of technical personnel. If we cannot provide them with the technical personnel, they cannot survive here because bringing their own personnel to run a fab in Vietnam, this is impossible. It's too expensive. So Vietnam have to develop, to train the people, so to make them ready for the others, for overseas companies. They say, hey, they want to establish a manufacturing here. We have the workforce. So with the wafer fab, we do believe that we can trigger or we can accelerate the training of those technical personnel. Universities try their part to give them the so-called theoretical background, but they need kind of hand-on training, and that is the fab. The fab can do the job.
What would you like to add?
Practice on top of the theoretical education. So that holds for technical educations, engineers, that holds for IC designers, that holds for system developers. Get into the field and use your hands and get them wet, I would say. And there the university can play a big role, but also the companies can help quite a bit.
From the standpoint of Vietnamese businesses, what should be done to attract more investment from global companies?
Well, it's early still, right? So I think the learning curve is still pretty steep. Look outside of Vietnam, study other markets, other emerging markets. But as I said earlier, the historic ones, everybody started at some point. But if it was 20 years ago or 25 years ago in China, look at these markets and see what they did and how the sector developed there. But I think you have all the ingredients here. It's just a matter of time and of all the right players coming together to make it happen. And education and training and workforce development is a huge part of that.
What are your recommendations for the government's policies?
Well, one is the obvious ones, is in tax incentives and land and creating these high-tech parks, like in Ho Chi Minh City or here in Hoa Lac. That's a very, very good start, because it allows an industry to have a home, in a sense, right? You can settle here, you can start building up a sector. I think it should always be the impetus from the government. At some point, I think the car needs to drive itself in a way. So you should become at some point independent of government incentives if possible. But as a Kickstarter for a young industry, for a nascent industry in this country, I think it is very, very important. So we're very thrilled that the interest is so great in various ministries and government agencies that were here at our event yesterday in particular. So I think that they're doing the right thing.
Dr. Van der Poel, what would you like to add?
From the education perspective, of course, the government should help getting the level of the education as needed for the industry. It has a big role in there. It can work within the universities. It can generate contacts to maybe outside Vietnam universities that are willing to help assist them. So education is a big part of the government support for the industry.
What do you think about the prospect of Vietnam's semiconductor industry in a few years to come?
Oh, I think, as Carol mentioned, we're going to see tremendous development and tremendous progress in the next few years. I have no doubt about that, because there's great determination at all levels and all the stakeholders that are involved to really wanting to make it happen.
I would like to add that, given the experience that I have from my visit in Vietnam, there's a lot of opportunities. The people are enormously willing, prepared to embark, take the risk, and I expect it to grow tremendously in a short time. So I'm very positive about the corporations, yes.
Once again, thank you very much for spending your time with us in our show today. And that just wrapped up this week's edition of Bizline. Thank you very much for being with us. Repeats of our show are online at vtv4.vn or youtube.com/vtv4go. And for now, goodbye from Hanoi.